Welcome to the special edition of Hannity. I'm Jason Chaffetz, in for Sean. And tonight we begin at the White House, where President Biden is recovering from a long trip abroad. Noticeably missing from Joe's world tour, his son Hunter. Once a fixture on his father's official visits, the Biden family's bagman is now laying low. Republicans are poised to take control of the House, and the administration is in panic mode. Tonight, the evidence is overwhelming. For years, the Biden family enriched themselves by selling access to the federal government to sketchy foreign nationals all over the world. Not only did Joe Biden reportedly participate in these illicit deals, but he also lied about it over and over again. Now, in an effort to muddy the upcoming House probe, Biden's allies are planning a multi-million-dollar smear campaign to personally attack anyone participating in the House investigation. Here now with the very latest, Fox News legal analyst Gregg Jarrett and Fox News contributor Joe Concha. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us tonight on Hannity. Joe, I want to go to you first because my former colleague Trey Gowdy, he liked to say, you know, the way the media treats this, they never saw a Republican investigation they ever thought was justified, and they never saw a Democratic investigation they ever thought should end. I mean, it's almost predictable, isn't it, on how they're going to treat any investigation into Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, for that matter?
Oh, my. I mean, Jason, for everyone who did an end zone dance around Democrats only losing the House by a touchdown instead of 3 touchdowns, a win is a win in the end. And when the new Congress is sworn in 2 months, we're going to see what a win looks like for the Republican Party, regardless of the margin. Many in the media, to your point, can downplay this all they like, just like they did the Hunter Biden laptop story in 2020 in calling it Russian disinformation. Boy, that looks foolish now, doesn't it? The Hunter Biden story is a huge story, potentially the biggest story of the Biden presidency. That's not hyperbole, because if, and this needs to be proven beyond the shadow of a doubt given the stakes, if the sitting president of the United States profited on the shady deals his son conducted, particularly in China, you know, for if he did, and by the way, Hunter Biden's business partner, Tony Bobulinski, has alleged such. We may have a president who is currently compromised by our biggest adversary, yet many in media are not only missing the courtesy gene that so many journalists should have in any story with this much evidence, courtesy of that laptop from hell. Those emails are real. Everybody's verified it. They seek to dismiss this and suppress it, just like they did in October of 2020. And look, the facts are the facts, and we're going to get to the facts now that we have a Congress that's actually interested in getting to the facts, Jason.
Yeah, Greg, things are going to change because soon, instead of being just Congressman Jim Jordan, he's going to be Chairman Jordan, and James Comer will have the same privileges and honors that I had when I was the chairman of the Oversight Committee. But I got to tell you what, I think the big challenge out there and the big question for the Department of Justice, will they, with the same veracity, pursue these subpoenas that are going to be issued by these 2 chairmen? And will they prosecute people who don't show up or that where there is evidence of criminal mischief?
No, I don't think they will. I think the record is well established that Merrick Garland has been running a protection racket for Joe and Hunter Biden. How else do you explain a 4.5-year investigation that appears to have gone nowhere in terms of any charges filed? And as you know, as a former member of Congress, any subpoena issued by the Oversight Committee or Judiciary is a meaningless scrap of paper. They cannot enforce it themselves. It has to be done by the Department of Justice, over which Merrick Garland presides. And, you know, so no mistake about it, this is the 31-page interim report by Republicans on the Oversight Committee. It is chock full of evidence of fraud, bribery, influence peddling, violations of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, self-enrichment. And yet there have been no charges. I think what's going to happen is that Merrick Garland will not enforce these subpoenas, and he'll say, well, I can't do it because, you know, our investigation into Joe and Hunter Biden is still ongoing. But this report makes it abundantly clear that foreign governments and entities were paying tens of millions of dollars to the Biden family and Hunter Biden's businesses, Romania, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, Russia, China in particular, more than $100 million flowing into the Biden coffers. And, you know, it's going to be very difficult for the Oversight Committee to get to the bottom of this unless they can get subpoena power that is enforceable.
Yeah, and along with that, not only a Department of Justice, we'll see how they react, because how they treated the Democrats should be the precedent. But I can't imagine that they're going to have the same sort of speed and drive that they did when Nancy Pelosi had the gavel. But, Joe, one of the things that's also going to change, and the Democrats have telegraphed this, they're starting this war room. They are literally going to pour millions of dollars to go in and attack and go after these members of Congress, trying to do their so-called fact-checking and everything in real time. I mean, when I was chairman of the Oversight Committee, I didn't face that. I faced a lot of things, but not this pre-announced war room where they're going to go after members of Congress. That's unprecedented in my book.
It is completely, and social media helps drive that, right? You create this illusion that the American people are absolutely against any investigation into the president's son, but more importantly, into the president and to his brother. And the real test now, Jason, is will ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, MSNBC, PBS, and basically every broadcast news station in this country, will they cover the Hunter Biden hearings with the same vigor, the same passion that we saw with the January 6 hearings, where, remember, all broadcasting was preempted as a result of those hearings that were produced, by the way, by a former president of ABC News. So, look, the same hearings, by the way, January 6th did not allow for any cross-examination in those particular hearings, and it was patently partisan. We all saw that in broad daylight. So, look, these hearings around Hunter Biden will be dismissed. They'll be mocked. They'll be ridiculed by the very same people that said you should absolutely positively take the January 6 hearings as seriously as a heart attack. It's bias and hypocrisy in broad daylight, Jason. But I think the American people, given the evidence, once again, given all those things that are on paper, all those wire transfers, bank transfers, after a while, when they start to hear this in other places besides traditional media, they'll be demanding answers because, again, this could be a sitting president that is compromised by the likes of China, Ukraine, and all the other countries that Greg just listed.
Greg, President Trump spoke less than an hour ago, and he was asking the question, how come if they're going to do a special prosecutor on Donald Trump, how come they're not going to be doing a special prosecutor with the conflicts of interest that the Attorney General has? Listen and watch here to what President Trump just said a few minutes ago.
The corrupt and highly political Justice Department just appointed a super radical left special counsel, better referred to as a special prosecutor, to start the process all over again. We thought it was just about dead. Joe Biden is a corrupt and incompetent political hack, and you take a look at all of the money that he's taken from foreign countries and others, much of it through his son Hunter, who is a corrupt drug addict and implementer for his father. Where's their special prosecutor, by the way?
Yeah. Greg, your reaction to what the president said?
Well, he's 100% correct. It's ludicrous to the point of being laughable for Merrick Garland to stand there and cite a conflict of interest that merits the appointment of a special counsel to investigate Trump, while at the same time there is a far greater conflict of interest that demands, and it's mandatory under the special counsel statute, for Garland to appoint a special counsel to investigate Hunter and Joe Biden. What also concerns me is that, you know, a special counsel under the regulations is supposed to be impartial and outside the Department of Justice. This named special counsel is far from impartial and neutral. He served in the DOJ during 2 Democrat administrations. He's clearly biased politically. And he's barely out of the Department of Justice, where he spent most of his career. So, you know, I am worried that this is shaping up to be just like the Andrew Weissman, Bob Mueller special counsel partisan team of prosecutors that are going to go after Donald Trump with a vengeance and not be fair as the special counsel statute demands.
Yeah, what a coincidence. They name a special prosecutor days after Donald Trump suggests that he declares that he's going to run for president, and just after the Republicans gain control of the House. So what a coincidence. It's just, it's almost embarrassing that they won't do a special prosecutor with the presidency. Yeah, and you look at this background, I think you're going to hear a lot more about this so-called independence of the special prosecutor. And look at his run-ins in his proximity to Lois Lerner in that investigation that the House was involved with. A lot more to come there. Gregg Jarrett, Joe Concha, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.